Look who finally showed up. Hey, everybody. It's our class loser. We weren't sure they let you out of whatever hole you crawled into. Glad you could make it, sweetheart. Really. The country club foyer went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when it has been waiting for a target. Brett Coleman held her hand a beat too long and turned his shoulders to the crowd, so the joke had an audience. He had been the quarterback once. He still stood like one. Chest first. Chin up. A man performing a memory of himself. Rebecca McDonald let him have the hand. She let him have the laugh, too. She had learned a long time ago that it cost nothing to let small people keep small words. Logistics, right? Or was it nothing? I forget. Brett grinned wider. No shame in it. Somebody's got to lose so the rest of us know we won. That was always you, McDonald. Reliable. She signed the guest book in clean block letters. McDonald, Rebecca. She set the pen down square to the edge of the page. She had driven into Westbrook the week before with one bag and a flight case, and the town had folded around her exactly as she remembered it. The water tower, the diner, the high school with its sun-faded sign. She had felt nothing she expected to feel. Not dread, not triumph, not even much sadness, just the flat readiness she carried before any mission, the quiet inventory of a place she had to operate in for a while before she could go home. The reunion was a checkpoint on the way to Sunday, nothing more. She would pass through it the way she passed through all of them. The Cedar Hollow Country Club had not changed in 10 years. Same brass sconces, same carpet the color of old wine. The reunion committee had hung a banner over the bar that read, "Welcome home, class of 2016, and somebody had stuck a foam football to the wall beneath it. 40-some alumni stood in clusters with drinks, and every one of them had turned to watch Brett work. You know, I almost went Special Forces, Brett told the half-circle around him. Not to Rebecca, about her, the way he did everything. Selection, the whole thing. Blew my knee out senior year, or I'd have been downrange while half this town was still figuring out community college. Different life. He tapped his knee through expensive denim. Anyway, people find their level. A few of them laughed. The woman beside him, Whitney, laughed the loudest, because that had always been her job. Rebecca said nothing. Her face did not move. Not the eyes, not the mouth. She took the insult the way she took a crosswind, with the smallest possible correction, and let it pass under her without changing course. Then she looked at the window. It was a small thing. A quarter turn of the head toward the tall west window that faced the valley. 2 miles out, a traffic helicopter was crossing the ridgeline, and the sound of it had not reached the building yet. It would not reach the building for several seconds, but she had already found it, already read its line of flight, already filed it and let it go. Before anyone in the room with their drinks and their old grudges heard the first thin beat of the rotor, Jake Bell saw her do it. He was at the end of the bar with a club soda, a broad, quiet man who had been a quiet boy, and he watched Rebecca McDonald turn toward a sound that was not there yet, watched her eyes track an aircraft through a wall, and watched her come back to the room as if she had checked a box. You heard that before it cleared the ridge, he said. Low, when she drifted to the bar. Most people don't. Old habit, Rebecca said. She took the chair at the corner table, the one angled to the door, and set her water down, and let her eyes move once around the room, the way a person maps a landing zone. Exits. Heads. The 2 steps to the nearest cover. She did it without knowing she did it. Jake noticed that, too. A woman she half remembered, Dana Whitfield, drifted over with a careful smile and asked what she had been up to all these years. Rebecca gave her the same flat word, logistics, and watched the woman's interest die right on schedule. People wanted a story whose shape they already knew. Rebecca had stopped handing strangers the real one a long time ago. It only ever cost her something and bought her nothing back. Brett reclaimed the room before it could drift too far from him. He had a way of doing that. A loud anecdote, a hand on a shoulder, the quarterback pulling the huddle back to the line. He told the one about the championship game, the fourth quarter drive, the knee that ended it all. The knee got bigger every year. Tonight it had cost him a recruiter, a scholarship, and most of a career in special operations, none of which had ever existed outside this room. Rebecca listened to a man rewrite his own past in real time and felt nothing close to anger. She had met real operators. She had pulled some of them off objectives on the worst nights of their lives, had heard what their voices did when the talking stopped. They did not sound like Brett. The ones who had actually done the thing almost never spoke of it at all. The party went back to itself. Brett held court. Whitney refilled the laugh whenever it ran low. Somewhere a phone played the old fight song, and three men who had not run in a decade sang the words. Rebecca watched it all from her corner, with the mild, patient attention of a person who has learned to be comfortable being invisible, who has in fact made invisibility into a skill, a thing you can put on like a flight suit. None of them looked at her twice. That was fine. She had not come for them to look at her. She had come for a Sunday 3 weeks out, and she could wait 3 weeks. She had waited longer for less. And under all of it, faint, below the music and the talk, came the sound Rebecca had already found. A rotor note, far off, crossing the valley in the dark. She turned her head a quarter-inch toward it, and went still, and the room kept laughing without knowing why she had stopped. She had spent 10 years learning to listen to the sky. The room would not understand that tonight. The room would understand it on a Sunday morning 3 weeks out, on the town green, when the sky finally answered her back. But that was not tonight. Tonight she finished her water, thanked no one, and let them think they had won. She arrived at the charity dinner 4 days later in the same plain way, and took the same kind of chair. It was a Saturday, the 2nd of May, and the ballroom was full of round tables and a silent auction nobody bid on. Rebecca sat where she could see the doors. She always sat where she could see the doors. It was not fear. It was arithmetic. A room had a shape, and the shape told you where trouble would come from and how long you had. And once you knew that you could stop thinking about it and eat your dinner. She had eaten dinner in worse rooms. The salads had just gone out when a man 2 tables over stood up wrong. Rebecca saw it before the sound of it, the way a body folds when the engine quits, the hand to the chest that is not drama, the gray that comes into a face. It was a classmate's father, a heavy man in a golf shirt, and he went down between the tables and took a chair with him. Rebecca was there before the chair stopped scraping. She did not run. She moved the way you move when running would cost you accuracy, fast and flat and economical, and she was on her knees beside him with 2 fingers on his neck before the nearest woman had finished her scream. No pulse. She said it to no one and to everyone. Her voice came out level and stripped of everything but information. Get the box off the wall by the kitchen. Now. You, call it in. Tell them cardiac arrest. Conscious time about a minute ago. She laced her hands over the man's sternum and started compressions at a hard, even cadence, counting under her breath, and her hands did not shake and did not drift. They stayed dead center, elbows locked, weight stacked, the rate metronome steady, the way a thing is done by someone who has done it when the light was bad and the floor was moving. 1 minute, she said. Where's my box? Brett arrived late and loud. He came through the tables with his phone already up, narrating to it. Okay, everybody stay calm. Give the man some air. We got this. I got this. He crouched into the frame near the man's feet, where he could be seen and do nothing. Rebecca did not look up at him. Move. You're in my light. She read the defibrillator pads the second the case opened, peeled, and placed them clean on the first try. upper right, lower left, the way the diagram never quite shows and the hands always know. Clear! Everyone flinched back. The box did its work. She had her hands back on his chest in under 2 seconds, counting again. A woman was sobbing somewhere behind her. A man kept asking if he should do something, anything, and Rebecca gave him a job, hold the doors, wave the ambulance in, because a person with a job is a person who is not in the way. She built order out of the panic the way she built it out of any chaos, by assigning it one task at a time, until the room ran the way she needed it to run. The man's chest rose on its own. She felt it under her hands before the monitor caught it, the engine catching, and she eased back and watched and counted and stayed ready to start again. She did not celebrate. She had learned a long way from here not to trust the first minute of anything. Brett had stopped filming. He stood at the edge of it now, the phone gone dark in his hand, and for a moment, something honest crossed his face, the dim awareness of a man who had brought a camera to a place that asked for hands. It didn't last. By the time the paramedics came through the doors, the man had a pulse and a rhythm, and Rebecca was kneeling in her dinner dress giving the report. Downtime, compressions, one shock, rhythm restored, no known history. She handed it off in a flat, clean stream, rate and timing and color, and then she sat back on her heels and let the professionals take the patient. One of the paramedics was Jake Bell, off duty, who had come because somebody texted him there was a man down at the club. He knelt across from her and listened to her hand the patient off, and something in his face changed. That was a 9-line, he said. That was a battlefield handoff. Where did you learn to talk like that? The man's grown son pushed through the gathering and gripped Rebecca's hand in both of his, searching for words that did not exist. She gave him instructions instead, which hospital to follow to, what to tell the doctors about the downtime and the single shock, turning the worst moment of his year into a short list he could carry in his hands. Then she let him go. Rebecca wiped her hands on a napkin and stood. The dress was ruined at the knees. She did not seem to notice. Around, she said. Around where? She picked up her bag. The room was loud again behind her, alive with the story it would tell for years. The night somebody saved a man's life, and already Brett's voice was in it somewhere, claiming a corner of the credit. What do you do, Rebecca? Jake asked. For work. Really? She looked at him for a moment, and he had the feeling of a door that opened an inch and stopped. Logistics, she said. And she left before he could ask which kind, and the lie sat there on the floor, next to the spot where she had brought a man back, too small for the thing it was covering. The slideshow night was where it turned cruel again, and cruel in a crowd. It was Friday, the 8th of May, in the club lounge, and somebody had set up a projector and a screen, and the committee was running old yearbook pages while people drank. There were laughs for the haircuts and the fashions, and the teacher everyone hated. It was warm and easy and almost kind for a while. Then the page came up. It was the senior superlatives, the joke page, and somebody had blown it up huge, so the whole wall was that one cruel block of it. Most likely to succeed, 2 smiling faces. Best couple. Class clown. And down in the corner, in a box the editors had thought was funny, in a box Brett had pushed for, a single grainy photo and 3 words. Least likely. Rebecca McDonald. The room laughed. Not all of it, but enough of it. Brett raised his glass to the wall. To tradition, he said. Some things never change. Rebecca watched the wall with her own face on it, 10 years younger, caught mid-blink, made into a punchline for the second time in one life. She did not flush. She did not look down. She reached into her bag and took out a small notebook and a pen and wrote one line and closed the notebook and put it away. A tray went over near the bar. The catering girl had caught her foot on the riser, a thin, nervous girl who could not have been more than 19, and a tray of glasses had gone down in a bright crash, and now Brett was on her. "Are you serious right now?" He was up and looming and loud, and the girl had gone white. "Do you know what those glasses cost? Do you know who runs this club? I will have your manager out here. What is your name? Look at me when I'm talking to you. What is your name?" "Hannah," the girl whispered. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clean it. You'll clean it. You bet you'll clean it." Rebecca stood up. She did not hurry. She crossed to the spill with that same flat economy and put herself between the girl and the man, and she crouched and began setting the unbroken glasses back on the tray with her bare hands, calm, deliberate, taking the moment apart piece by piece. "My fault," Rebecca said. "I bumped her. Go get a broom, Hannah, the long-handled one. Take your time." Hannah fled. Brett stared down at the top of Rebecca's bent head. "Of course it was you," he said, and found the joke again, because the joke was the only place he was safe. "Still cleaning up after people? Still the help? Some things never change, right, everybody?" Whitney appeared at his elbow with 2 fresh drinks and the particular confidence of a person who has decided a thing is funny and will defend the joke against all the evidence in the world. She looked Rebecca over, the plain dress, the flat shoes, the steadiness that would not break for her, and she reached for the old script because it was the only one she had ever owned. "Some people peak in high school," she said to Brett, about Rebecca, the way they had all always done it. "And some people don't even get the peak." The circle laughed on cue. Rebecca let it land and slide off her like rain off a canopy. She had been rained on by far worse than this, in far worse country than a country club lounge. Rebecca set the last glass upright. She looked at the kneeling shards a moment, and then she stood. And when Hannah came back with the broom, Rebecca took her gently by the elbow and turned her so their backs were to the room. "Eyes level," Rebecca said, very low, just to her. "Look at me. You did nothing wrong. Write down the time and what he said. Tonight, before you forget the words. Keep your chin where it is. People like that only own the room you give them." Hannah nodded, fast, blinking. If watching a whole room laugh at the same person twice in 10 years does something to you, if it lights a small hot thing behind your ribs, then you already understand this channel, and you should follow it, because that hot thing is the whole reason these stories get told. Rebecca walked back to her corner. She took out the notebook again and added nothing to it. She slid it into her bag, and she looked up at the wall where her younger face still hung in its little box of 3 words, and her expression had not changed at all. The committee meeting was where Brett learned to use paper. It was Tuesday, the 12th of May, in the club's small back room, folding chairs and a printed agenda and burnt coffee. 8 committee members, and Brett at the head, running it like a board he owned. Rebecca sat in the second row, because she had asked to be there, because she had asked for one thing. "New business," Brett said. "I want to propose an award for the gala. We always do a couple of fun ones, right, Whitney? The fun ones. I think we give Rebecca here the Comeback Kid Award." He let that sit for the laugh. "You know, least likely, all that. Full circle. It's an honor, technically. All in favor?" Hands went up around the laughing. "Motion carries." Brett wrote it down with a flourish, the procedure itself a kind of cruelty, the vote a way to make the meanness fair. Democratic. Nobody's being mean. The people have spoken. Not all of them had spoken. A man near the back, Dale Pruitt, who taught shop now and had a daughter waiting tables to put herself through school, did not raise his hand and did not laugh, and looked at the table in front of him as if he wished he were anywhere else on earth. Brett did not notice. Brett never counted the hands that stayed down. He only ever heard the laugh, and the laugh told him he had won, and so he had learned nothing at all in 10 years, except how to be louder about it. Rebecca had asked for one thing, and she asked for it now. "I'd like 90 seconds at the gala," she said, "to say something about a classmate. Cody Marsh. He didn't make it back. There's a dedication that weekend, and I'd like to." "Tabled," Brett said before she finished. "Time's tight. Maybe if we have a gap." He moved to the next item. Rebecca said one word. "Understood." And she did not write anything down, and she did not argue, and the not arguing unsettled Brett more than a fight would have, because a fight he knew how to win. Her phone buzzed against her leg. She rose, quiet, and stepped into the corridor, and took the call in a voice the committee could hear the shape of, but not the meaning. "Confirm 2 ships," she said into the phone, low and even and clipped. "Wheels up 06. Time on target is the bell, not a second after. If the ceiling drops below 1,000, we scrub to the alternate, and I want that brief by Friday." "Yeah. Talon copies." Out. For a moment she stood alone in the corridor, with the next 3 weeks unfolding in her head. The weather windows, the maintenance test flights, the rehearsal she would fly at first light over an empty valley, so that the real one on Sunday would be flawless. None of it was logistics. All of it was the most careful work she had done in a long time, because it was for Cody, and Cody got her best. She came back in and sat down. Brett could not let it go. "Important phone call," he said, smirking to the room. "Big logistics emergency? Somebody order the wrong staplers?" The committee laughed. Rebecca let it pass over her. That same small correction against a crosswind. No drift, no climb. The meeting closed. Brett caught her at the door, pleased with himself, generous in victory. "Gala's gonna be a night you'll never forget," he said. "Promise you that, MacDonald." "I believe you," Rebecca said, evenly. And she meant a thing he did not. And she left him standing in the doorway feeling, for reasons he could not name, like he had just signed something without reading it. Jake Bell could not let it go either, but for the opposite reason. He sat in the Westbrook firehouse on Thursday, the 14th of May, off shift, a laptop open on the day room table and a cooling coffee beside it. He kept turning 2 things over, the way she had handed off that cardiac patient, clean as a radio call. The way she had heard a helicopter through a wall. He had been infantry. 1 tour. He knew what right looked like, and he knew that Rebecca MacDonald moved like someone who had a great deal of right in her past, and had decided to carry none of it where people could see. He called an old buddy from his battalion, a man who had stayed in. "Hypothetical," Jake said. "Woman, our age, talks in 9 lines. Hears aircraft before they show. Reads a room for exits without thinking. What is she?" "She's not logistics," the buddy said, and laughed. "Logistics doesn't hear inbound through a wall. Logistics doesn't run a code like a range drill. You're describing aircrew, brother. Probably rotary. Probably somebody who got shot at a lot, and then decided to be boring about it for the rest of her life." He paused. "What's her name?" "I'll ask around." Jake did not give it. It did not feel like his to give. The next morning, Jake stopped at the diner on Main, and Rebecca was there in a booth with a coffee, and Hannah Pruitt was bussing the next table over and lit up like a window when she saw her. The diner owner, an old man named Pete, was refilling cups. High overhead, 2 helicopters crossed, very high, on their way somewhere, just a pair of specks and a wash of sound. "Hueys," Rebecca said, not looking up from her coffee. "No. 1 Huey, 1 Black Hawk. Listen, the 4-blade slap on the second one. Different rotor." She turned a page of the menu she was not reading. Pete stared at her. "How in the world do you know what those are by ear?" "Spend enough time around them," Rebecca said, and you stop hearing engines. You start hearing which one's about to need a wrench. Hannah, clearing the next booth, beamed at her, and Rebecca gave the girl a small nod that Hannah carried off like something worth more than any tip. Jake did not say anything. He paid for his eggs and went home and opened the laptop and went looking, and he had to dig because she had buried it the way she buried everything. But Valor citations are public if you know the shape of the words, and he found it. He read it once. He read it again. A night over Kandahar in the spring of 2020. An attack helicopter pilot who held her orbit under heavy ground fire to cover a pinned infantry platoon, who stayed on station after her own aircraft was hit, who would not break station until the platoon was clear. A call sign, a decoration most people only ever read about. He sat with it a long time. He thought about the woman crouched in a ruined dress over a stranger's chest, the woman who had taken a forearm grab and a cruel joke, and a whole lounge laughing at a 10-year-old photograph, and had not once raised her voice. He had assumed she was hiding because she was beaten down. He understood now that she was hiding the way a loaded thing sits quiet in a drawer. There was a kind of person who had nothing left to prove to anybody, and she was the first one he had ever watched a whole town fail to recognize. This town was about to learn what one man in a firehouse already knew, and if you want to be there when it lands, when the whole green finds out at once, that is what the subscribe button is for, because the moment is coming, and it only happens once. Jake read the last line of the citation aloud to his empty kitchen. For conspicuous gallantry in action, Talon 6. And he closed the laptop very carefully, the way you close a door on something sleeping, and he decided he would be on the green Sunday morning, early, near the front. She was alone in her childhood bedroom on Friday night, the 15th of May, the night before the gala, and this is the only place the story goes inside her. So listen. The boxes were still taped. Her mother kept the room like a museum of a girl who had never really lived here. There was a window over the same street, the same crooked maple, the same view she had memorized at 14, while the laughter from the talent show still rang in her ears. She had played piano that night, freshman year. She had practiced for months, and Brett and 2 others had gotten to the soundboard, and at the exact moment her hands came down on the keys, they had cut the microphone and pumped a recording of a crying baby through the gym speakers, and 400 kids had laughed until they cried, and somebody had yelled the word, and the word had stuck, and she had walked off that stage the class loser and stayed it for 2 more years. She had not cried. That was the part she remembered most clearly now, a grown woman sitting in a museum of her own girlhood. She had walked off the stage with her chin level, because somewhere in the worst minute of her young life, she had decided that her face belonged to her, and she would not give it to them. She had not known yet that this would be the single most useful thing she ever learned. It would keep her alive in a cockpit a long way from this gym, years later, when the panel went red and the voice in the front seat went quiet. You keep your face. You fly the aircraft. You do the next correct thing, and then the one after that. One person had not laughed. Cody Marsh, back row, a skinny kid the size of the joke himself, who had saved her a seat at lunch the next day and every day after. They used to sit under the bleachers and make the pact. Get out. Get out of Westbrook and never come back small. He wanted to be a ranger. She did not know what she wanted, except up, except out, except the sky. They both enlisted the summer after graduation in 2016. He went to the infantry. She went to flight school and surprised everyone but Cody, who had never once been surprised by her. She thought about Kandahar because she always thought about Kandahar in a quiet room. The spring of 2020, a platoon pinned in a dry wadi, taking fire from 3 sides, a long way from anyone who could help. She had been a young chief warrant officer then, 22 years old, with a gun in the front seat and a voice on the radio begging for time. She had given them time. She had flown her orbit through tracer that came up lazy and then fast, and a round had walked up the side of her aircraft and into the cockpit, and her front-seater's voice had gone thin and wet over the intercom, and she had kept the orbit. 11 minutes. She had held the orbit for 11 minutes with a wounded man in front of her and a hole in her aircraft until the platoon was off the X and behind the wire, and the ground commander, a voice she never met, had said her old call sign was not enough for what she had just done, and given her a new one over the radio, and it had stuck the way the bad word once stuck, except this one she had earned. She still heard the gunner's voice sometimes, thin and far away over the intercom, telling her he was fine when he was not fine, telling her to keep flying. She had kept flying. That was the math of the job nobody printed on a recruiting poster. You keep flying while the person 2 feet in front of you is hurt, because breaking the orbit kills the 40 people on the ground, and so you hold, and you hate it, and you hold anyway, and then you carry the holding home with you for the rest of your life. The medal did not mention any of that. Medals never do. They put a medal on her for it. She kept it in a sock drawer, under the spare buttons and the foreign coins, because the medal was not the thing. The thing was the platoon. 41 men and women who went home, who had children now, who would never know the name of the woman who circled over them in the dark and refused to leave. She did not need them to know. That was the whole difference between her and every Brett Coleman she had ever met. The work was the reward. The rest was noise. Her front-seater had lived. He flew a desk 2 states over now, and they texted on the anniversary every year. 2 words each, still here, which was the entire conversation, and all of it that needed saying between 2 people who had bled in the same small space. And in 2021, they folded a flag for Cody Marsh and handed it to his mother on a lawn 9 streets from here. And Rebecca had stood in the back in her dress uniform that no one in Westbrook had ever seen. And she had decided then that she would find a way to fly for him over this town, one day, where the people who had laughed at both of them could see what they had become. That was why she had come home to a place that named her a loser. Not for them. For Cody. She thought about the bleachers one more time before she let herself sleep. 2 outcasts on a Tuesday, 15 years old, splitting a vending machine sandwich and swearing to each other that this town did not get to be the end of the story. He had kept his half of the promise all the way to a foreign ridgeline and a folded flag. She was keeping hers on Sunday, with 2 aircraft and a missing man pull-up, and the whole town looking at the sky. He would have laughed at the size of it. He would have loved the size of it. The skinny kid who saved her a seat at lunch would have stood up in the back of that crowd and yelled her call sign until his voice gave out. She laid the flight suit flat over the chair. She set the alarm on her phone for 0500. She looked at the dark street one more time, and she turned off the light. The gala was Saturday, the 16th of May, and Brett crossed the line in front of 3 phone cameras and did not know it was a line. The ballroom was dressed up, candles, and a small stage, a microphone, the committee's awards on a draped table. Rebecca came in a simple dark dress and carried one thing, a framed photograph of a young soldier, which she set carefully on the gift table near the stage. Cody Marsh in his ranger tan, grinning, alive. She meant to dedicate the flyover with it. She had not been given her 90 seconds, but she had brought him anyway. The fun awards came near the end. Brett ran them, of course. And our last one, he said, milking it, the room warm and loose with wine. The comeback kid. For the classmate who came the absolute farthest, from the absolute bottom. Rebecca McDonald. Come on up here, sweetheart. She walked up with deliberate economy, no waste in it, took the plaque, and said 2 words into the microphone. Thank you. It was not enough reaction for him. It was never enough. Brett wanted the old thing, the flinch, The burning face, the loser walking off the stage, and she had not given it to him. So he reached out and took her by the forearm and pulled her back to the mic, laughing, playing it for the room. "Whoa, where are you going? The people want a speech. Say something, McDonald. Tell us about logistics." The room half laughed and half went quiet, the way a room does when a joke leans too far. Hannah Pruitt at the catering line had her phone up. So did two others. Rebecca did not pull against his grip. That was the thing people would notice later, watching the video frame by frame. She did not yank her arm back, did not stiffen, did not give him the struggle that would have made it a scene he controlled. She simply stood inside his hand, weight balanced, perfectly still, the way a person stands when she has already decided that the man holding her arm is going to regret it on a schedule of her choosing and not his. Her stillness made him work harder for the reaction. It always did, and he never once understood why. Brett, sweeping his arm wide for the crowd, knocked the framed photograph off the gift table. It hit the floor, and the glass cracked, and Cody Marsh's grinning face split down the middle, and Brett's loafer came down on it as he turned, and the frame crunched, and he laughed. "Whoa, Butterfingers, who brings a picture to a party?" The room had gone all the way quiet now. Rebecca looked down at the broken frame on the floor. She crouched in front of all of them and picked it up and turned it right side up and brushed the glass from Cody's face with her thumb. And then she stood and she looked at Brett Coleman. And for the first time in 3 weeks, for the first time in the whole long performance of her humiliation, she smiled. It was a small smile. Private, almost kind. The smile of someone who has read the last page and is watching you reach for the book. "Thank you, Brett," she said, and she stepped off the stage with the broken photograph held against her chest, and she walked out, and the room let her go. Brett stood under the lights with the plaque in his hand and the cameras still up, and he watched that small smile go out the door, and something cold moved through him for the first time all night. Something he could not name. The specific fear of a man who has just realized that the person he has been hitting has not been hitting back for a reason. The town green, Sunday morning, the 17th of May. Armed Forces Day. The day the sky answered. They had built a new memorial wall at the north end of the green, low black granite under a white drape, and the town had turned out in folding chairs across the grass. The reunion crowd was there in a block near the front, Brett among them in a blazer, still loud, still narrating, telling the people around him he had helped organize this, more or less in a way. At the podium stood a retired command sergeant major named Walter Quint, a granite-faced old soldier in a blazer heavy with miniatures, and he ran the ceremony the way such men run things, on time and without waste. "We will now render flyover honors," Quint said into the microphone, and a hush came over the green. Today's flight is flown in honor of the fallen of Westbrook, and in particular, Sergeant First Class Cody Marsh, United States Army Rangers, killed in action, who was born and raised on these streets. Heads turned at the name. A few of the older classmates remembered the skinny outcast and felt something turn over in them. Rendering honors, Quint went on, reading from a card. "Your air mission commander today, Chief Warrant Officer, 3 Rebecca McDonald, call sign Talon 6, Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, United States Army." For 1 full second, nobody in the reunion block understood. Then Jake Bell, standing at the edge of the front row, said it 1 beat before the loudspeaker finished, quiet and certain, to the people around him. "That's Talon 6. That's her. That's Rebecca." Heads snapped to the chairs where Rebecca McDonald had been sitting all morning in a plain coat. The chair was empty. Across the green, beyond the trees at the edge of the field, a figure was walking to 2 waiting helicopters. She had a flight suit on now and a survival vest, and she carried her helmet under her arm, And even at that distance, the walk was unmistakable. The same flat economy. No waste in it. Every eye on the green followed her now. The reunion block turned as one, the way a field turns toward weather, to watch the woman they had spent a decade dismissing walk away from them across the grass toward a thing not one of them could have named correctly an hour before. She did not look back at them. She had no reason to. She had stopped needing the town to see her a long time before the town finally did. She reached the lead aircraft and swung up into the cockpit and pulled the helmet on, and her hands began to move across the panel, switches and guards, the start sequence running by muscle memory, fast and exact, the way a thing is done by someone who has done it 10,000 times in the dark. On the green, nobody moved. The reunion block sat frozen in their folding chairs with the programs going limp in their laps. Whitney had a hand pressed over her mouth. The man who had laughed loudest at the slideshow was on his feet, without knowing he had stood. And Brett himself had risen halfway out of his chair, without deciding to, mouth open, the blazer he had worn to look important, suddenly the cheapest thing on the field. The turbines lit, the rotors turned, and turned faster, and then both aircraft came up off the field in a wash of sound that rolled across the green and pressed every program flat against every lap. The two Apaches crossed the green low enough to feel in the chest, in tight formation, and at the center line, the second ship pulled straight up and away into the empty sky. The missing man, the place where Cody Marsh would have been, and the sound of it went through the crowd like a hand laid flat on the heart. The whole green froze. For 10 years, this town had carried a picture of Rebecca McDonald, and the picture was a grainy box on a yearbook page and a single cruel word. The picture shattered all at once, in front of all of them, replaced by a sound they could feel in their teeth and a truth they could not argue with. You can laugh at a person. You cannot laugh at an aircraft 300 feet over your head, flown by the person you laughed at, in honor of the dead. And Brett Coleman's face, turned up at the lead aircraft, went through all of it in order. Confusion first. Then disbelief. The actual shaking of the head. No, that is not. That cannot be. Then recognition. The cold drop of it. The loser. The help. The woman whose arm he had grabbed last night was 300 feet over his head, holding an aircraft he could not have imagined flying. And last of all, the horror, plain and total, as every word he had said for 3 weeks, for 10 years, came back down on him in the rotor wash. The veterans on the green were on their feet. Jake Bell stood at attention and brought his hand up in a slow salute, and held it. The old men in the folding chairs held theirs. Walter Quint held his at the podium. Old men who had not stood straight in years found the posture again, hands flat and level at the brow, eyes wet, holding the salute the way they had been taught in another century for exactly this. A flyover for the fallen is the oldest promise the service makes, that no one is left behind, that someone will always come back over the field for you. The green understood it now in a way no speech could ever have taught them. And across the green, the people who had spent 10 years laughing tilted their heads back, all of them, and looked up at the woman they had called a loser, holding the one thing not a single one of them could hold. After that, it came apart fast, the way these things do once the first beam goes. By the time the aircraft had landed and Rebecca walked back across the grass in her flight suit, the reunion block was a different animal. Someone had found the citation on a phone and was reading it out loud. Someone else was saying the date over Kandahar. The story moved through the crowd faster than anyone could correct it, and it did not need correcting, because for once, it was simply true. Brett tried to get out in front of it. He always did. "I knew," he started. "I always said she had something. We go way back, me and McDonald." But Whitney was looking at him strangely now, and a man beside him said, flat, You said you almost went Special Forces, Brett. She held an orbit through tracer with a hole in her bird. Sit down. And Brett sat down, more or less, into the crowd that had been his audience for 10 years, and was not his audience anymore. There was no single dramatic moment for him, no slap, no shouted speech. There was only the slow, cold arithmetic of a green full of people recalculating a man in real time, every story he had ever told, sliding one column to the left into the place marked untrue. He had built himself out of other people's belief, and he stood there now and felt it drain out of the field like water out of cupped hands. Jake Bell walked up to Rebecca and stopped a respectful pace off and rendered a last salute, soldier to soldier, and she returned it. "Logistics," he said. "Logistics," she agreed, and almost smiled. Hannah Pruitt's video of the gala was already moving by then. The grabbed arm, the broken photograph, the loafer coming down on a dead ranger's face. By lunch, the town said Brett Coleman's name with a different sound in it. By evening, the dealership's number had stopped being a punchline and started being a thing people scrolled past on purpose. And here, if any of this reached the place these stories are meant to reach, is the quiet point of all of it. She never raised her voice. She never raised a hand. She did not need revenge, because the truth, when it finally stood up, did more than revenge ever could. And if that lands somewhere in you, the subscribe button is how you say so. Rebecca found Hannah near the catering tent and pressed a card into her hand. A name at an aviation maintenance program, a real one, a way out. "Call them Monday," Rebecca said. "Tell them I sent you. Eyes level. You're not the help. You never were." Hannah looked at the card, and then at her father, Dale, who had come to find her in the thinning crowd, and the two of them stood there holding a small piece of paper with a different life printed on it. Rebecca did not stay to be thanked. She had learned a long time ago that the giving was the thing, and that standing around for the gratitude only ever made it about you. She was already walking when Hannah called her name across the grass, and she lifted one hand without turning and kept going. Evening came down soft over the green, and the chairs were folded, and the crowd was gone, and Rebecca McDonald walked alone to the black granite wall. She found his name with her fingers. Cody Marsh. She set the repaired photograph against the base of the stone, the crack in the glass running across the corner of his grin, and she rested 2 fingers on the cut letters of his name and stood there in the long light without saying anything at all, because the thing between them had never needed words and did not need them now. Her phone vibrated against her hip, a message from a number with no name, the way the important ones always came. A line of greeting only one other living person used, an old wingman she had thought she might never hear from again. A theater named, far to the east. A date, close. Wheels up. By the door of her mother's house, a flight bag sat packed and waiting, the way it had waited her whole life, the way it would wait again. She read the message once. She put the phone away. She looked at Cody's name one last time in the dying light, and then she turned and walked back across the green toward the bag and the door and whatever the sky asked of her next. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.